Alright there guys, and welcome back to a new video, and today... Oh boy, I bet you've been waiting for this one. I know someone has. On the 19th of June 2020, The Last of Us Part 2 was released. And for the next 41 days consecutively, I uploaded an episode of my Let's Play. I made the game my most prioritized Let's Play on my channel in its history, being the first Let's Play on my channel ever to have uploads every single day of the same series constantly until it finished. Well, it is now time. Now that it's been over 2 weeks, now it's been pretty much 2.5 weeks since I finished the Let's Play, and I have not played the game since then. It is time for my honest thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. Okay. I was going to structure this into different things, but I decided, no, forget that. I'm just going to talk about what I want to talk about for this game. And the first thing I want to talk about is Joel. Joel is easily one of the most, if not the most popular character in The Last of Us. You play 90% of the first game is played as Joel. He's a character that we saw lose his daughter in the first 20 minutes of the first game. We have seen what Joel has gone through in his life, which has led him to trust nobody, always be suspicious, and not reveal his name or where he lives. Let me give you the examples. In the prologue of The Last of Us Part 1, when you're playing as Sarah, when you're in the car with Joel and Tommy, there's a guy with his family asking them to stop, and Joel says to Tommy, keep driving. And Tommy says, but they have a kid, Joel, and he says, so do we. Joel is very suspicious of everyone as soon as the outbreak started. Literally, the outbreak starts, and Joel is already super suspicious of everything and doesn't want to deal with any strangers. An even better example is when Joel and Ellie first arrive at Pittsburgh. You remember the cutscene? It was actually one of the trailers for the game, the first game before it came out in 2013. Where there's this guy who's walking towards Joel and Ellie's truck, holding his stomach as if he's been shot. And Joel says, "Put your seatbelt on, Ellie." And she says, "But what about the guy?" And then Joel says one of the most iconic lines in the whole franchise, "He ain't even hurt." Puts his foot down and runs the guy over. Joel can tell when someone is faking an injury. The fact that Joel could tell, he wasn't even close to the guy, and instantly could tell he was faking it to try and make them get out so they could get the drop on him. But yet, in The Last of Us Part 2, Neil Druckmann throws everything that made Joel in the first game, everything that made Joel as a character in the first game, they just get rid of it. They completely get rid of it. And how is that? Well, why would Joel have saved Abby in the first place? Randomly. Yes, him and Tommy were on patrol, and their path happened to be run into Abby's path. I get that, but still, Joel could have just shot the infected, and then him and Tommy could have just bolted. They did not have to save Abby at all. Right? So that's already... Joel isn't suspicious that Abby may have just been bitten by the infected that was on top of her that he shot. Why would he not be suspicious? Why he should have been suspicious? Because an infected just jumped on top of her. But no, he's not. Then we have, when they arrive at Abby's hideout, they put their bags, which, you know, have all their equipment and ammo inside, they just put them down. They walk into the room. Joel walks into the direct middle of the room where he has no escape from. Tommy and Joel reveal their names to Abby's group, which they're just strangers and you're just revealing their names. They even say, Tommy even says, "Oh, when they ask, do you live around here?" He says, "Couple hours down the hill." Why would you reveal where you live to strangers, you idiot? And then, well, then Joel says, "Y'all act like you heard of her or something." And every single person in the room stops talking and looks up at Joel. And then, of course, Abby says, because they have, blasts Joel's knee, and then later on kills him. Neil Druckmann literally wrote Joel's character in The Last of Us Part 2 to be a completely different character than he was in The Last of Us Part 1. As if he's not even Joel. Simply he has the appearance and the name, but he is a completely different character. Why would you do that? Why would you change one of the most beloved characters in the whole franchise from the first game? Ruin them, and within 2 hours of gameplay in the first game, Joel's dead. You spent the whole first game with Joel, pretty much. Waited 7 years for the second game to see Joel and Ellie bonding together again, and Joel's dead. How is that good? That is not good story writing. And Neil Druckmann co-wrote The Last of Us Part 2 with Haley Gross. And if you look her up, she has very, very minimal amount of work that she's done in terms of writing. She wrote a couple of episodes of Westworld and a few other things, but she's never written for a video game before. And yet her first experience co-writing the story for a video game is Naughty Dog's most ambitious project to date. Not a good look, is it? And we get that The Last of Us... Now, Neil Druckmann has said The Last of Us Part 1 is about love, and the second game is the complete opposite. It's about hate. So, we get that the games... The motive behind the games, love and hate, are the driving forces for the games. And of course, love and hate are two polar opposites of each other. But they also made Ellie a less intelligent character than she was in the first game. When she opens the door to where Abby's hitting Joel with the golf club, why does she walk forward like this and not just shoot? Why does she not just shoot? Shoot Abby. Because then, boom, Abby's dead. Oh, because then we don't have a game, do we? Because you're 2 hours in and you've already killed, and the main antagonist has been killed already. You don't have a game, so you have to find some way to keep her alive. So they make Ellie stupid. And not just shoot. Then she gets pinned to the ground and watches Joel die right in front of her. Nobody wanted to see Joel die, but I was shocked when it happened, as you probably could tell from in the episode it happened in, because I shouted Joel when it happened. Ah dear. But it doesn't mean I wanted it to happen, so R.I.P. Joel, we lost him. We already knew that Ellie was going to be the predominantly played character. Like, we played 5 minutes of Joel throughout the whole game. And that's the very, very start of the game. Literally, from that house that Joel and Tommy were in at the start, to going back to their home. That's literally all you play as Joel for, and then you never play as him again. Ellie. Let's talk about Ellie now. After Joel is killed, Ellie's whole journey, up until the scene where Abby and Lev arrive at the theatre, up until that point, Ellie's sole goal is to track down Abby, isn't it? Her sole goal is to track down Abby. That's what you spend the 3 days in Seattle doing. Only for her to find you, after Ellie kills Mel and Owen. And then was stupid enough to leave her map that she got used to get to the aquarium by leaving it at the aquarium for Abby, so she could use it to track down Ellie. But Ellie was made I genuinely think Neil Druckmann didn't want our Ellie and Joel to succeed in their journey. Well, Joel definitely, because Joel dies very quickly in the second game. But even with Ellie, you track down Abby for the whole 3 days. You don't even find her. You find everyone else but her. She finds you. And then there's a cliffhanger, isn't there? Then you have to play pretty much all 3 days of Seattle again as Abby this time, because the game's trying to make you feel sorry for her, trying to make you understand her motives a bit better. You killed Joel. It doesn't matter what motives you had. Fine, Joel killed your dad. Guess what? In the first game, I bet there was zero intentions that surgeon was going to be important in any way. But because we need some context for the second game, let's turn that surgeon that in the first game you are forced to kill, let's turn him into an important character and make him Abby's dad. Which is why she kills Joel. But she never knew what Joel looked like, but yet she somehow just knows it's him when she first sees him. When he first says his name is Joel, she just knows who he is instantly, despite... There's a lot of people with the name Joel Miller. How do you know he is definitely the right one? Yes, he is the right one, but how would she have known that so easily? And then you have the Abby versus Ellie boss fight, where you actually have to play as Abby against Ellie. Where is that? In what way is this a good idea? Yeah, let's play as the antagonist and be forced to beat up the protagonist. No, that doesn't make any sense. I will give them props, as it was a risk. It was ambitious and it was risky. Because when do games ever do that? When does a game have you play as the antagonist and fight against the protagonist who you've been playing as for quite a while? That never really happens in games. That's like, I don't know, that's like that's like making Uncharted 4 and having halfway through the game you play as Rafe instead of Nate, and you have to fight Nate as Rafe, only to then fight Rafe as Nate at the end of the game. That's essentially what it would be like if they put that in Uncharted. But then, after Abby, for the second time, lets Ellie live, despite she has no reason to, Ellie then tracks her down a second time, but she leaves everything. She would rather track down Abby than stay with Dina. So Dina dumps Ellie, so they are no longer girlfriends. Dina dumps Ellie and takes her baby with her away. And Ellie goes to track down Abby, only to get to her at the beach, fight her a second time, only you play as Ellie this time, and you then don't even kill her. Ellie allows her to go. Oh, despite Abby bit 2 of her fingers off, which... Is that actually really... Is it even possible to do that? Can a human actually bite off the fingers of another human? Is that physically possible? And then Ellie just lets Abby and Lev go. So she gave up everything she had to get revenge on Abby, and then she doesn't even get revenge on Abby. What's the point in that? It's not showing that Ellie is grown as a person. It's showing she's stupid. And Dean said to me that because he beat the game very quickly. In fact, he got the platinum trophy within 4 days of the game being released. I don't know how you do that. But yeah, he has the platinum trophy for The Last of Us Part 2. He got the game on the 19th of June, beat it the first time on the 21st, and beat it the second time on the 23rd. It took him 4 days to beat the whole game twice, even including playing on Survivor, the hardest difficulty in the game. It took me over a month to beat the game once, and he beat it twice in 4 days. That's something only streamers would normally do. But yeah, Ellie threw away everything she had. She lost Dina as a girlfriend. She lost JJ as a potential... as a children figure for her to raise with Dina. She pretty much abandoned everything just to kill Abby, and then she didn't even do that. I just don't understand how anyone can think that's a good idea in a story. Because it isn't. The whole game is about revenge. But yet, Abby realizes that getting revenge on Joel didn't really satisfy her in any way. And Ellie's the bigger person because she let Abby go. No, she's not the bigger person. Dean said, alright, that was the point I was making. Dean said to me, but Joel wouldn't have wanted Ellie to kill Abby. Oh, really? What does Joel do at the end of the first game in St. Mary's Hospital after he's picked up Ellie and put her in the car ready to leave? He'd shot Marlene once, goes back over to her, and she says, "Wait, let me go, please." And Joel just says, "You just come after her," and puts a bullet in her head. That's the type of character that Joel is not in the second game. He isn't that character anymore. Because he's right. If he did let Marlene go and let her get herself healed, she would come after Ellie. So that's why Joel made sure not to let her do that by killing her. And you get that same... Think about it. It would have been a much better choice, much better writing if the game... You know how in episodic games, like The Walking Dead, Life is Strange, Batman Telltale series, those games, how you have choices to make. Pretty much, you have choices to make all the time. The Last of Us Part 2 should have had, for the final thing in the whole game, they should have had a choice where you can pick between killing Abby or letting her go. You actually get the player gets to decide how the game ends, rather than the game having a set ending where the antagonist gets away. Give the player the choice. If they choose to let her go, then the ending that we actually got is that ending. But if we choose kill Abby, Ellie finishes Abby off, and probably kills Lev as well. Now then, let's talk about all the characters that are new to the second game that I that are not improvements. Abby, not an improvement on Tess. Jesse, definitely not an improvement on Bill. Lev and Yara, they're just replacements for Henry and Sam. Not as good. I mean, the game really tries to make you sympathise with Abby by when she saves Lev and Yara and fights against her own people. She fights the Scars and the WLF soldiers. No, she's only doing it. And she said it. She's helping them because they saved her life. Who else saved Abby's life earlier in the game that she didn't help and instead killed? Oh, right. Joel. She said she helps the people that save her. Oh, that's weird. Joel saved your life, but you didn't save him. In fact, you repaid him by a shotgun shell in his leg and a golf club in his head. That's what you did. Just know. But yeah, Tess and Abby, Tess is easily the better character. Believe it or not, the way The Last of Us Part 2 is structured, as Abby chasing down Joel and then killing him because of something he did to a member of her family, that was actually Neil Druckmann's original idea for The Last of Us Part 1, but the antagonist was going to be Tess. She was going to be against you rather than with you. And Joel, the story was Joel kills Tess's brother, so Tess chases down him and Ellie across the country, captures Joel, and Ellie has to save him. Exactly the same as what Abby did in the second game, only Ellie doesn't save him. Think about it. Neil Druckmann had that kind of idea floating around in his head since 2004. But every time he proposed the idea to a person or a studio, they always rejected it. I wonder why. Because it's not a good story. And what a surprise! When he actually is given the chance to make that story he's had for the past 16 years going around in his head, it turns out it absolutely bombs and it ends up being a largely criticised and bad story. Which means there was a reason why this story was never accepted by anybody. He gave that story. He proposed that story to George Romero, for fuck's sake. George Romero, the most iconic zombie movie director of all time, and he said no. He then proposed it to an indie video game studio. They said no. Every time he proposed that idea to someone, they said no. So this feels like a bit of bitterness from Neil Druckmann, where he creates the story that he'd been trying so hard to get out there, and then it ends up being terrible. So no. Now, I want to talk about the gameplay. Okay, this is an issue that I personally have more than other people will. The gameplay in the first game and the second game is the same. But yet the gameplay in the second game feels worse than the first game. I don't know how to explain that, but it just does. It feels worse. And especially the game mechanics feel worse. Let me give you an example. You guys saw that in my Let's Play, very early on, I killed a clicker. I stealth killed a clicker, and I was standing still, but the other clicker in the room spotted me. How can it spot me when I'm not moving and it can't see? Didn't make any sense. The fact that they got rid of nail bombs and replaced nail bombs with stun bombs, super bad choice in my opinion. I found that really dumb. Yes, let's get rid of a very useful item that was very, very helpful in the first game. Replace it with something that essentially does the same thing, only it literally cannot kill anything. It can't kill anything. That's what happened. Oh dear. The trap mine was okay. It was all right, I guess. It was useful in some. It was useful again, I guess, in some parts. The fact that you have to use your supplements to upgrades just to be able to craft smoke bombs is stupid. Smoke bombs were the least useful equipment in the first game anyway. But now you can't even use them unless you actually have to upgrade your supplements just to get there. And they just changed so much. Now, one thing I will say about the supplements, the fact that they're, instead of just one branch of supplements, there's a ton of branches with different upgrades. I will give them credit on that. That was a good idea. That was a very good idea to change to add different branches of supplement upgrades. But the problem with that is by doing that, they then went and screwed it up at the same time, because what they did was they made it so you couldn't choose which upgrades you could have in what order, in any order you want. You have to pick there is always a specific order you have to pick your upgrades. As you guys know, in the first game, when I got my supplements, the first thing I upgraded when I had the chance was maximum health. Both times. That's the very first thing I upgraded, because you could pick whatever you wanted. However, in the second game, you have to go down one by one, upgrading to get to the upgrades that you want. Adding a silencer is actually something I'm happy about, because I actually asked for that. I said, that's something I wish was in the first game, silenced weapons. And the second game gives you the silenced pistol, gives you a silencer to put on your pistol, and provides you with that. So I will give them credit on that one. But why do the enemies have pinpoint accuracy? It's like, say you're running at them and they kill you, and it says, enemies will find it easy to hit you if you run straight at them. Yes, if you're running like this, of course it'll be easy. But if you're running like this, that it shouldn't be as easy for them to hit you. No, they still pinpoint accuracy, always hit you no matter what. I hate that so much. And you guys know, because I raged so hard when playing the first game. I raged so hard when I was fighting all those WLF soldiers as Ellie when they had dogs as well in Seattle Day 1. I hated that so much. And weapon upgrades, let's talk about them. Weapon upgrades have actually been made worse, because you can only upgrade one thing, one bar per weapon. Like, what I mean by that is, in the first game, you could upgrade the same thing multiple times on a gun, like ammo, like clip capacity. You could upgrade that multiple times. In the second game, no, you can only upgrade it once. Every single upgrade, you can only use that upgrade once. In the first game, almost everything almost every single upgrade had multiple slots that you could do the same upgrade multiple times to get better, to make your guns better. Such as the 9mm pistol. In the first game, you can upgrade the clip capacity multiple times to get more ammo in the clip. The second game, you can only do it once. Yes, it upgrades it by 4 instead of 1, but I'd still rather be able to do the same upgrade multiple times. Although I will give Naughty Dog credit in how when you're playing as Ellie to when you're playing as Abby, they have different you can only use certain guns per character. Like as Abby, you can use the marksman rifle, pistol, which is literally just El Diablo because when you put a scope on it, it literally is El Diablo from the first game. But Ellie, you can use a revolver. Although I will give credit to them how you can craft a marksman rifle ammo. Stop saying marksman rifle, marksman pistol ammo. How you can craft it. I do like that. And I do like the fact that with weapon, you don't have to use supplement your weapon upgrade parts to give yourself a second pistol and rifle holster. You just find them. I do like that. Instead of having to spend so many points on your pistol and rifle second slots, you just find them and then you have them for free. I do like that. Now I want to talk about the boss fight between Ellie and Abby the first time, when you have to play as Abby. It's a stupid idea. It's an ambitious and risky idea, but it's also pretty stupid because you literally spent 3 in-game days in Seattle tracking Abby down, only to then have to track as Abby for the same amount of time to track Ellie down, and then you have to fight Ellie as Abby. Here's why I don't like the boss fight. If you guys remember from the first game, there is a character in the first game who's a cannibal called David. And he has a boss fight in the first game when you're playing as Ellie, doesn't he? You have to stealth round here. He has a revolver and a machete, and you have to stealth round him and stealth attack him 3 times in order to beat him, don't you? In order to finish the fight. Did you notice that the second game, I even mentioned this as the first time I died in that boss fight as Abby, how this boss fight, fighting Ellie as Abby, is literally a rehash of the first game, the David boss fight from the first game. It's literally the exact same boss fight all over again, only made harder by the fact that Ellie has infinite trip mines, infinite ammo, and a machete that she definitely does not have when you were last playing as her. However, I actually have a way to fix that boss fight. What would make that boss fight more fair is if Ellie had just 2 shotgun shells when you last played as her, that's all she could use against you. If she had one arrow in her bow and arrow, she could only use that 1 arrow. If she missed, that was it. She couldn't use any more arrows. If she had 1 trap mine, she could only use that. And if you don't go anywhere near it, she can't kill you with it. Her pistol, if she had 3 bullets in her 9mm pistol, that's all she should be able to use against you. If she has no melee weapon, she shouldn't be allowed to use a melee weapon against you. Personally, I think that would make the fight fairer, because better players. So if people who were playing as Ellie did really well as her, were very cautious with their ammo, didn't use it a whole lot, then when they fight Ellie as Abby, they have a much harder boss fight to see if they can handle what they had when they have nothing. And if you were somebody like me who ran out of ammo all the time and had to rely on a very specific set of events that had to happen in a specific order in order to succeed in certain sections, such as when it looked like Abby was abandoned by Lev and Yara, and those clickers, runners, and shamblers all came into the room at the same time, and I died so many times there. But then I picked up the bricks, killed 2 of the clickers with my shivs, killed the runners with my marksman rifle, use my 3 shotgun shells to kill one of the shamblers, and then Lev and Yara would have arrived at the truck from the inside of the truck that's halfway inside the building that I could climb out of. But if you used a lot of ammo as Ellie and you didn't have that much ammo when playing as her, she has very low ammo and equipment to when she fights you. That's the way I would structure the Ellie versus Abby first boss fight when you take on Ellie as Abby. Ellie is only able to use against you what she could use with you. I think that would be a much fairer way of doing it. Because it gives the better players a harder challenge, but it gives the players that didn't do so well an easier run because of how much ammo you've had to use as Ellie in the first place. Let's talk a little bit about Lev now. The dynamic between Lev and Abby was actually somewhat good. It was like, if Lev and Abby were not tied to The Last of Us Part 2 and had their own game, that could actually be something pretty good. Because in The Last of Us Part 2, we see a lot of scars calling Lev Lily. So you have a conversation with Yara and you realise that Lev is a biological female but identifies as a male, i.e. Lev is a transgender man. That's essential. That's literally the point they're making. Now, okay, cool. Having a transgender character in The Last of Us Part 2, okay. He's pretty good with his bow, that's cool, but here's the problem. Other than being transgender, what does Lev have going for him? There is literally nothing else to his character apart from his relationship with Abby, in the way the two, how they look out for each other. But that's it. That's the thing Naughty Dog should have done more on. But, of course, as I just said, if there was a second game, a completely separate game with just Abby and Lev away from The Last of Us, they could explore Lev's character a bit more and how he came to feel that he was transgender. That would be interesting, because Naughty Dog really did not explore Lev's character that much. So it really doesn't make us care for him that much, because he's a new character that we've met halfway through the game. The only reason he's with you is because him and Yara saved you, Abby, from getting hung. And him being trans is like the only interesting thing he's got going for him. So if Lev was not trans, then he'd literally be a nothing character. Naughty Dog really should have thought of something to give Lev as a personality. In fact, being trans isn't even really his personality. He barely even talks about it. He mentions it once to Abby, saying, "Did you hear those guys calling me Lily?" Yes. Do you want to ask about it? Do you want me to ask about it? No. Then why bring it up? But that's literally the only time Lev himself brings up the inkling that he's transgender. He doesn't really talk about it that much either, so... I mean, it's cool that his actor is also a transgender male. I think that's kind of pretty interesting, how a trans male is voicing a trans male. That's cool, but that's kind of all Lev has got going for him. But him and Yara, they just aren't anything close to Henry and Sam. Now, let's finish off this video with the ending of The Last of Us Part 2. Let's talk about the ending. So, the ending has Ellie and Abby fight each other on the shore of the beach. Ellie shoves her knife into Abby's shoulder. Abby bites Ellie's left ring and pinky finger off completely, somehow. Ellie is drowning Abby, and then she has a flashback of Joel, and then stops and tells Abby to go and leave. Which is very dumb. Why? Because let's rewind back to the first game. Remember the scene just before the scene where Sam pulls up his pants leg and sees that he has a bite. What did Ellie say? Sam asked Ellie, "What are you afraid of?" And she says, "How are you not afraid of those things?" And Ellie says, "Who says I'm not afraid?" So then he asks her, what is she afraid of? And she says scorpions are pretty creepy. But the important one is ending up alone. Ending up alone is what she's most afraid of. And even in that super emotional scene in the ranch between Joel and Ellie, where Ellie says everyone that she has cared for has either died or left her, everyone except Joel. But yeah, Ellie is willing to lose everything that she's ever had, that she has, just to get revenge, just to take vengeance on Abby, and then doesn't. Which means she was willing to lose Dina as a girlfriend and possibly never see her again. Willing to lose everything, willing to abandon everything that she's ever cared about. I mean, when she arrives back at her farmhouse that her and Dina were living in, she starts trying to play the guitar, but because of her 2 fingers that got bitten off, she can't play it, so she just puts it down and leaves the house. Where's she going? Who knows? Where do Abby and Lev go? Who knows? Where's Dina gone? Who knows? The game doesn't even really end. That's the problem. That's the biggest issue with The Last of Us Part 2. The game doesn't even end. It just stops. But it doesn't actually end. There's no end conclusion to anything. The story just stops. So, The Last of Us Part 3? Who knows? Probably not, though. I feel like with how bad The Last of Us Part 2 has been, how poorly received The Last of Us Part 2 has been from the users, who knows if there will be a Last of Us Part 3, because I've never seen a Naughty Dog game get this amount of hate before. Not even Uncharted 3 got this amount of hate, and that game is the worst out of the lot of them. It's the worst Uncharted game out of the main 4. But it's still pretty good, though. And actually, there's 2 more things I want to go over before we end the video off. The next thing is the flashbacks. I do like how the flashbacks for Abby tie everything together, but if they were at the beginning of the game, rather than just midway through at random points, the story would have been appreciated way more, and it would have been better story writing to put the flashbacks of Joel killing Abby's dad first before we even met Abby. Before we even met her in the present day. Like, all of Abby's flashbacks from multiple years ago, when it says 4 years ago when she's younger, all of those flashbacks for Abby needed to happen in all consecutively. There should have been no break between flashback and present day. All the flashbacks should have been together. But the first flashback in the whole game with Joel and Ellie in going around that dinosaur and space shuttle museum, oh, that's glorious. That's the best scene. That's the best part of the entire game. I love that bit so much. It's so good. And again, those flashbacks should have been at the very, very beginning of the game. Of course, it's quite crazy and emotional to see Ellie burst out into tears when Joel tells her finally admits to her what really happened at St. Mary's Hospital at the end of the first game. And then we see a scene very, very close to the end of very close to the end of the game, where it's a flashback to the events before the second game even started, but very, very close to the start of the second game, where Ellie says, "My life would have meant something and you took that from me." She says, "I don't think I can forgive you that, but I'd like to try." And she held that grudge for 2 years, and by the time she was ready to forgive him, he died. Ellie held the grudge for two full years, and the person she held it against then got killed because she wouldn't forgive him, because in the first game there was no guarantee of a cure, but in the second game, suddenly the vaccine would have 100% have worked. They literally changed how the percentage of the vaccine would work from the first game to the second game out of nowhere. And here's why Ellie is a mentally and emotionally weaker character in the second game than she was in the first game. In the first game, she was 14 years old, wasn't she? She murdered an entire group of cannibals, single-handedly, all by herself, which includes David. She murdered him all by herself. No one was helping her. She did it all on her own, because Joel was recovering from being impaled, wasn't he? But yet, in the second game, that guy Seth, who calls Ellie and Dina, calls Dina a loudmouth dyke, which dyke is a derogatory term for lesbian, if you didn't know. And here's the thing. Ellie literally murdered an entire group of cannibals when she was 14, but at the age of 18 to 19, she gets called a dyke once and gets offended. Ellie, you murdered a group of cannibals when you were 14 by yourself. Why are you getting offended over that? Yes, it's a homophobic comment that Seth made, but Ellie should be mentally and emotionally way stronger than that to just brush it off as if yeah, whatever. I don't care. But she doesn't. She's an emotionally and mentally weaker character, as is Joel in the second game. So I'm going to finish off this video by addressing something that I actually should have addressed at the start of the video. And that is the horrific abuse that Laura Bailey, voice actress that plays Abby, and Neil Druckmann, the director of the game, received. The amount of vile and disgusting abuse that on social media that both of them got when the game was released. Laura Bailey was getting death threats because her character Abby kills Joel. She's just doing her job. She's the one. She plays Abby. She's just doing her job by Kit, and her character happens to kill the main character of the first game. And Neil Druckmann has also received a lot of abuse on social media, saying like a lot of people being homophobic and transphobic towards the way he designed the story. First of all, Ellie was gay in the first game. How are you complaining about Ellie being gay now when she was in the first game? She's still the same person, for God's sake. Did you not play The Last of Us Left Behind? When it was finally revealed that Ellie is actually a lesbian. But yet, people still couldn't get that around. Originally, people thought Abby was trans because there's no way Abby could have the physique that she does in a post-apocalyptic world. Not even a man could probably pull that type of physique off in the post-apocalyptic world. So how the hell can a woman do it? It's unreal. Her physique is unrealistic. So people thought she was a man. Well, a trans woman that was born a man. But no, Lev was actually the trans character, and a bunch of people are saying that making Lev transgender is ruining the whole franchise and stuff like that. A lot of people calling Neil Druckmann an SJW leftist, which he probably does vote on the left in America. I mean, he probably did vote on the left, and probably will vote on the left this year. But the point is, quite interesting for him to be called an SJW, because some people still can't get round to the fact that just because a character has just because a show, movie, or a game has a gay or trans, or both in this case, characters, has gay and trans characters, doesn't mean it's SJW virtue signalling. I mean, if they actually gave Lev a personality, that would have helped, but Lev being trans makes no difference to the story, since everyone around him other than Abby dies anyway. A lot of people were calling Neil Druckmann sexist as well against men, because the only no male characters survive apart from Tommy, and he only just barely survives after getting shot by Abby back in the theatre. But yeah. Think about it. Joel, male, dies. Manny, male, dies. Owen, male, dies. Isaac, male, dies. Every single male character that has some importance to the story is killed off. So I somewhat understand the Neil Druckmann and Haley Gross, the other writer, are getting called feminists, because with the way I'm describing it, it does seem a bit anti-men, how all the men are getting killed but all the women are surviving, with Yara being pretty much the only female who actually of any importance to the game who actually dies. Well, other than Mel, of course. I mean, I forgot. I mean, Alice the dog dies, but she's a dog, not a person, so it's not quite the same meaning. And the only male character that has any importance to the story that survives, other than Tommy, is Lev, who was born female. Only due to having the identity of a man does it make Lev male, but still has a female body. But yeah, the vile and disgusting abuse that they've received on social media, it was completely uncalled for. Criticising the game is fine, but attacking their choices just because a character is gay or trans, that's just wrong. But unfortunately, because they got so much abuse that Neil Druckmann couldn't distinguish abuse from the game being very fairly critiqued. He just took any fair criticisms of the game as abuse, which he should have been more open to feedback on the game from people that were criticised it fairly, but he didn't, which sucks. So that, who knows what is next for Naughty Dog? They've made their equivalent of Black Ops 4 to Treyarch, a game that we were all excited for, but then ended up not being anywhere near as good as we were hoping. And wow, to think this video's almost taken an hour. I do ramble on a lot, don't I? But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Please be sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Follow me on all my social medias. And next week, I will be doing the Dragon Ball Super Tournament of Power setup review. Until then, catch you later.